everybody. You're on the TV show on the YouTube channel Rozmova z Pani Maior. We are here in Ukraine, Kharkiv, and right now I have just a wonderful guest for you. I know that it's very hard for us to talk about the stories that happened in Ukraine, but I do always thinking that we need more possibilities to show the world the truth. So right now in our studio is the human rights activist and author, senior advisor at Human Rights First and professor of Queen's University in Northern Ireland, Dooley. Frankly speaking, this talk was very hard, emotional for me, but also it was a very, very big honor to be right down with such deep and great person. So he's waiting for us. Let's talk. Brian, I'm very excited for our talk.
Me too.
I'd like to say thank you from all of Ukrainians, all of the Kharkivites that you are here. You're not afraid. You are with us on our side. It's really very important for us. It's a big pleasure to see the person who really sees the reality and who understands what is going on.
That people come here and see for themselves what's happening. I'm a bit disappointed that more people don't come, really. You know, I meet a lot of people in Europe and in the US who go to Ukraine. That's great, but generally people don't go much further than Kyiv. You know, and Ukraine is a lot more than just Kyiv. And you know what's happening here, right at and close to the Eastern Front, it doesn't really get reported on very much, and that's part of the reason that I feel I should come here and report on it, because yes, some journalists come, but generally diplomats don't come here. International NGOs generally don't come here. So part of the reason, not the only reason, but part of the reason I want to come here is because most other people aren't. And Kharkiv has a very strange magnetic pull for me, right? So it's very difficult to explain. But there is something about Kharkiv. It's a strange place, right? But I want to keep coming back. I first came here in 2017. I've been doing some work around documenting human rights issues in Ukraine since 2014. Right?
Yeah. Because of the atoll, yes?
Because of the first invasion, but then also I've been working on a few other issues. One was around LGBTQ issues in Ukraine generally, but most of that work I've done was in Kyiv, but also with attacks on anti-corruption activists, right? So I was in Kyiv and I heard that some anti-corruption activists in Kharkiv had been beaten up on the street in 2017. So I came here just for, I think, a day or two and saw the city. And then when the full-scale invasion happened, you know, this is really where I wanted to come and report from. I came here in April 22. And, you know, a lot of the city was obviously deserted, and many people were living in the metro stations.
Yes.
But from April 22, then I came back again in August 22, and I saw a big difference.
Yes.
You know, the city's starting to come back to life a bit, and then in the months after that, I mean, it's not normal here, right? It's far from normal, but it's
better than it was.
It's better than it was, and it's like a functioning city. You know, Kharkiv to me is a very functional place. It's not the most beautiful city in the world, right?
Absolutely.
And that's okay, right?
Yeah.
But it has a very strong attraction. I've been here. It's 3 years since the invasion, right? That's 36 months. And I've been here 18 times, so there's more or less every other month. And there's so much to report about here. Has so much to see and so much to help with. But yeah, Kharkiv has a strange energy and magnetism, right? And you know, people always ask me, why do you go to Kharkiv? And it's hard to explain, right? And when I think about Kharkiv, there's a great identity, a sort of a pride for people who are from here, right? If somebody's from Kharkiv, they're going to tell you that, like, within the first minute, right? If you meet them, like in Poland or England, they're going to tell you, not just they're from Ukraine, they're going to say, we're from Kharkiv, right? And if they're from Saltivka, they're going to tell you that also, right?
Yes.
But people from Kharkiv typically are going to tell you they're from Kharkiv, and then within 2 or 3 minutes, they're going to tell you something which is better about Kharkiv than Kyiv, right?
Absolutely.
Could be anything. Could be something big or small, right? I was talking to a woman a few months ago. She said, I'm from Kharkiv. And I've been to Kharkiv, blah, blah, blah. And somehow the conversation was about bicycles, right? I don't know. And of course she said, Kharkiv is much better for bicycles than Kyiv. Okay, all right. So it's this identity, and you see it everywhere. You see baseball caps with 1654, right? You don't even have to say Kharkiv. You just have to say 1654, or these small badges with the thermometer, right? Yeah. Now the thermometer for me is the most Kharkiv thing, right? It's not pretty.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Very functional. Yeah. Right? It tells you the temperature and the time. Yeah. Right? It doesn't pretend to be beautiful. And when I first saw it, I don't know, it's a statement somehow about the city. And when I see it, it shows that big range of temperatures, right? Like from plus 30 to minus 20 or something. And for me, that really represents Kharkiv, because it's saying we can survive no matter how hot you make it, no matter how cold you make it, this is going to stay here, right? It's very dependable, reliable. So anyway, I'm always fascinated by people's local pride here. And you see when you see graffiti here, it's about Kharkiv, right? Of course, it's Ukraine, but really Kharkiv is the strong identity. And I've been very lucky in those last 3 years to be able to travel outside of the city too, to various big and small places, to Izium, to Kupiansk. In Kupiansk, many times, part of what I do here is to report on various volunteer initiatives, all sorts of things. People who are providing food, the architect, Olga Kleitman, who is renovating an old building for an old people's home. There's the shop that sells vegetables from the occupied around places around Volonterska, right? Yeah. There's the LGBT NGOs are providing humanitarian aid. And one of the things I've done much more in the last year or so is to report on and help with the evacuations from the front line. So that's Kupiansk, also even outside Kharkiv to Pokrovsk. So I've seen some extraordinary people. Actually, that's not true. I've seen ordinary people do extraordinary things. And I've been doing this sort of work in many places in the world for many years, for decades. And the thing that most interests me when people volunteer to help are people who respond when trouble comes to them. So 3-4 years ago, people here who were not really active in volunteering or politics or human rights, right? When something super dramatic happens, like in February 22, a lot of people leave, and totally understandable, right? But other people just decide to stay, and even if they have no experience in how to set up a food kitchen or experience in providing humanitarian aid or in evacuations, right? They just see that's what's needed, and they figure out how to do it. And for me, they're the most interesting stories. The the woman Natalia who drives an ambulance to take humanitarian aid, she used to be a violinist, right? These guys that do the evacuations from the front line 4 or 5 years ago, they weren't doing volunteer work at all, right? I mean,
Yeah.
people who just respond.
Because it felt like this by our hearts, by our souls, so we had any choice, another choice. This was the only way.
And for me, that's sort of the definition of kindness, really.
Yeah.
You know, you're doing it, you don't have to.
Yeah, but you're doing.
And you know, remember too that for women in Ukraine, like I know there are personal circumstances also involved, but they all can leave the country, right? So women who are here because they chose to stay here. And people are doing these very kind things at real and sometimes enormous personal risk. So this is the fascination for me. You know, people who are not confronted with these sorts of dangers often think, you know, if something really bad happened to my country or to my city, you know, if we were invaded, you know, you see people who maybe you wouldn't have thought would be those who would respond so strongly are the ones who are doing the things that are needed, saving lives. I mean, there's nothing over dramatic about saying that. I mean, I see people all over this city and around this city who are saving lives at great risk to themselves.
Yeah.
So while there are terrible things happening here, this is also the best of people, right?
You're touching my heart very deep right now with these words.
I mean, it's not that complicated, you know. It's super dramatic and simple, and you know, people are in danger and they chose to stay and help. It's no more complicated than that.
You know, I can ask you about the Trump, about the Oval Office, because I really do think that Ukraine right now is representing the humanity, the love for the country and the independence. And we are representing to all over the world that we are strong, we are very kind people, and we are more than just a people, we are humans. And the position of the President of the United States a few days ago was, for me, it was awful. It was a shock for me.
So, first of all, I do work for an American organization, Human Rights First, but I'm Irish, so I'm not American. I can't speak for Americans, right? But I was here in Kharkiv when that press conference happened, and in the days since, you know, part of the characteristic, I guess, of Kharkiv and Ukraine is people aren't super friendly on the street. I mean, it's okay, right? People aren't rude, but they don't just come and randomly start chatting to you, right? But they have the last few days. And people have come up to me in coffee shops and other places and said, did you see the press conference and what do you think? Really what they mean is they want to tell me what they think, right? Which is good too. But I've been doing this sort of work. I've been involved somehow in American politics, working, you know, sort of on the fringes of it for 40 years. And I've never seen anything like that. And I think there's a sort of a dramatic, shocking lesson for us all here that this is the new politics. Like, we don't like it, we don't want it to be true, but we better accept that this is how politics is done now, because I see that, you know, and I know it's only a few days ago, but, you know, there's no point being paralyzed by it. If you're just in shock of, I can't believe that happened, then it's a natural reaction, but you're not really figuring out how to respond, okay? And I think we have to be better. I mean, this isn't just about Ukraine. It is about Ukraine, but it's wider than that. We have to be better in figuring out how we respond to this new politics. We can't spend 4 years saying, oh, my God, I can't believe what he's done now. Absolutely. Oh, have you seen the latest, right? Because, you know, the more that we're just shocked and paralyzed, the more he'll be able to do. So I've never seen anything like it. I don't think that's the last time we're going to see such behaviour.
Yeah, I do agree.
From the White House.
It was just a performance, I don't know.
The people who have spoken to me about it, there's a general consensus, I think, here anyway, that it wasn't spontaneous, that it was somehow, planned, right? That Trump and Vance had decided they were going to go for Zelensky. The other interesting thing to me too here is that people who've spoken to me about it have said, some of them have started by saying that they're not a big fan of Zelensky, right? Or they didn't vote for Zelensky, but they thought he did very well in that moment. I thought he did too. I thought that was a shocking level of provocation of him. And, whatever you think about him generally or how he handles the war or anything else, I thought he represented Ukraine with dignity there. But as I say, I think that these sorts of attacks will continue, partly because we haven't really figured out how to defend ourselves and counter against that sort of new politics. Quite what it means in a bigger picture, I don't know. It seems to have, in the last few days, woken up Western Europe a bit more.
Yeah.
And, you can see this happening a little over the last couple of years, and I suppose fairly predictably, of course, it's those countries in the east of Western Europe, the Baltics, Poland, who have most been trying to...
They need to be in Taunus.
Trying to organise a response, right? And now you see France and Germany and Britain waking up more, I guess, with some more solid proposals. I think, if I may just say a word about Ireland, it's a very small country, right?
Well, very beautiful.
The most beautiful country in the world.
Yeah.
I jumping ahead far into the future, maybe this year, I don't know, but Ireland has offered to provide peacekeeping troops in Ukraine. Now, Ireland's military is very small, and really most of what Ireland's military has experienced is in peacekeeping in the Congo and in Lebanon. And Ireland is in Western Europe, it's in the European Union, but it's not in NATO. So that it might mean that combination of factors might mean it's likely to come here. So congratulations, you may get a lot of Irish soldiers here in the future. I'm sure they'll enjoy Kharkiv.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope they'll see our not so beautiful but a magic place.
It's attractive and charming.
Sure, I don't think that it was just a one-time performance in the Oval Office. I think it's really a new type of politics, and it will be more emotional. It will be more. They'll use the NLP, they'll use neuro-linguistic programming, and they will use psychology, they'll use it all for us. And also we have a meme in TikTok, in Ukrainian TikTok, that it was the first time when Ukraine yelled on the America. So Zelensky is our hero because he was the only one who yelled on Trump in his office, and it's funny and it's not.
It's really I've worked doing this sort of work for a long time, like I say, and a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was doing some research in Hungary. And somebody there was telling me, a local activist was telling me how Orban, very similar to Trump, in his politics, his new politics, and was saying that Orban goes to the European Union and he behaves in a way that diplomats don't know how to handle him. It's like, she said, it's like that somebody comes to your house for a dinner party and they put their feet on the table. And nobody knows how to respond, right? And we, I think, are still stuck in this moment of, oh my God, like Trump, Vance, Musk behaving like their feet are on the table. Like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Well, we have to figure out what to do. right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're just going to be stuck here looking like this for years. Yeah.
I would like to ask you about the difference for you between the 22, 23, 24, and 25. Yes, between these years. We are ready for 3 years in a full-scale invasion and more than 10 years in invasion, the first invasion of Russia.
Yeah.
It's very hard for me to understand these numbers because I have a 10 and a half years old son.
Yeah.
And nearby 3 weeks ago, he asked me, Mom, what it looks like to live the time when it's no war? I was crying. He's a very tough guy. He's very strong. He has a great sense of humor. But this question, it was very hard. And I do really understand the difference between all of these years and the evolution of the war. But I want to hear your side of you. It's very interesting because I know in not looking that you are not Ukrainian, you do know about us very much.
Well, I think, one of the, many long-term issues here, of course, are going to be the effect on children. And when you think if your son is 10 and a half, that for him, 3 years is sort of a different time frame than for us, right? I mean, 3 years is a long time for anybody, but for him, that's sort of half of all he can remember, So I'm not an expert on Ukraine. I'm an expert on Kharkiv. I come here every 2 months or so for the last 3 years, and so I get, a snapshot of the city and how it's evolved. And of course, it changed very dramatically from early 22 until late 22. In that October pushback of the Russian forces, things really, changed.
It was a great operation.
And when I came here in the first half of 22, there was much more artillery shelling. And I mean, the city was basically deserted, right? And it was impossible nearly to, find coffee shops or anything open, right? And now, on some days, you go to Nikolsky and most places are open, and teenagers are hanging out on the street, especially in the summer. Again, it never looks like a normal city, right? Because any minute the air raid alarm can go off. But I think what's impressive to me, and I think maybe a lesson for other cities who are going to go through war, is how Kharkiv has adapted. So many things, simple things now. So many things are just underground. Like I know some schools are underground, coffee shops are underground. The gym is underground, right? And so you can. I guess that's a good example. You can function underground, but you shouldn't have to, and you should never start to think that this is normal life, because it's not normal life, right? But some things have really been very impressive. I think the transport has been very impressive. I've been travelling across this country by train for 3 years, and before that too. And let me tell you, the train system here is way more efficient than in Britain or in Ireland or in America or in most places in Western Europe, really. And you see people adapting in how they're living their lives in other ways. I mean, the curfew cuts off life here at whatever 10 o'clock or so at night. But people are still socialising, and I think that's important, that it's not just, I mean, from 2022, obviously the emphasis was just on the basics, staying warm, getting enough to eat, trying to get medicine when you need it. Now there's, life is much more colourful than that now, right? And there's theatre and there's music and there's culture here.
Also underground.
Also underground, because it has to be. And it's one of those issues too when people ask me over the last month or two, they've asked me more and more, do you think it's possible, whether it's a good idea or not, but is it possible to have elections in Ukraine? And again, well, I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea or when it should be, but the idea of being able to do that in Kharkiv looks to me very, very difficult. To have people. I mean, the last thing you want in a city like this is crowds gathering, because that's such a target. So over the years, I guess I've seen very bad days in early 22, and the city come to life a bit. But then since I guess May last year, there's that sense is back. I think that the Russians are
coming back.
I mean, it's a big difference between the enemy forces being 20 miles away and 10 miles away.
Absolutely,
right?
yes.
So last year, the year before, I went to Sakuni, to Lipsy, and Lipsy now really is frontline. Right? You can't just go there. And so, I get that feeling here. Not that Russian soldiers are going to come on the streets here. I think that would be a shock. But that there's a sense that things are getting closer. And certainly when I've been on trips further south from here, I mean, I was in and around the villages in Selidor and other places in Pokrovsk in October. Helping with evacuations, and many of those villages now where we were getting people to take them to safety, now they've been occupied.
Yes, and it's awful. But our troops are learning fast. The enemy is learning fast, but we are faster. And the right is always on our side because we are staying for our homes, for our family, for our land, for our country, for our independence, and at least for our souls. I'd like to ask you what the purpose of your organization is here in Ukraine, the global.
So we mostly work actually on American human rights issues. So most of what my organization does it's not the thing I do, but much of what my organization does is around rights of refugees to come to America from all over the world. And of course, that has also been an area, an issue which Trump has really attacked.
Yes, right? He is aggressive about it.
Super aggressive about that, talking about deporting people back to countries, now putting people in Guantanamo prison. And so much of my organization has been focused on that. We also have a strand of work which is around trying to sanction people for human rights abuses, including Russians, but also from other places in the world. And a relatively small part of our overall work is the work I do here. I do some work in other parts of Europe, in the Middle East too. And over the last, I've been with the organization 14 years, and I guess for most of that, I've somehow been focused on Ukraine, but also some other places in Egypt, Bahrain, Hong Kong, places which are different to here in that they live under very extreme dictatorships. And so when you look at the model of volunteering here, it's different. I mean, people are volunteering or doing human rights work in those countries, but they're not at war, but there's different sorts of dangers, like they're under very heavy surveillance, and the police are following them all the time, and they have to be careful how they communicate and so on. And another large part of my work has been around the conflict in the north of Ireland, although that finished more than 25 years ago. It lasted for about the 30 years before that. And many of the issues which happened during that conflict, people being killed, people being tortured, they've never really been properly investigated or resolved. And so that's an example of how at the end of a conflict or at the end of a fighting, you really need, as fast as you can, as fairly as you can, sort out those human rights issues.
Well.
So if I can make a bad comparison to Ukraine, because it's different, but what we really don't want to see is when there's a peace deal here, if some of those human rights issues are like traded away. So for instance, we don't want to see people who are suspected of war crimes. They should still be prosecuted.
Yes.
And we don't want to see a peace deal where you say, okay, we will sign this peace deal, but it means, people won't be prosecuted for war crimes. Those children who were taken by force from Ukraine to Russia, that really needs to be part of a deal that they need to come back. The prisoner of war exchanges, you don't want to see a situation where somehow there's a peace deal signed by Russia on condition somehow that the ICC quietly drops its investigation of Putin. Not just because those things would be wrong and unjust, but if you don't deal with those issues right at the end of a conflict and set up systems to deal with them, then 30 years later you're still going to be facing. People don't have the sense of justice or fairness. So again, back to Northern Ireland, there are still people carrying now intergenerational trauma, right? It goes from parents to children and even
Absolutely
grandchildren.
Right, yes.
And so, I know there are a lot of problems to address here. And even if the fighting finished tomorrow, right? It's not the end of all the problems.
Yeah, right? It's just another start.
It's another stage,
yes.
Right? But I think, Ukraine it can and should look at other examples of conflict to see the day after is a great phrase, but the day after the conflict, how do you go on a path that really tries to bring justice and will end in a sustainable and just peace. One of the pieces of research which has come out several pieces over the last few years, which I think is just very important and very persuasive, is that when you look at how conflicts end around the world, right?
Yep.
I mean, this is just data. This is just science, fact, right? If women are involved, if women activists are involved in the negotiations and in how the peace deal works, that peace deal has a much greater chance of succeeding, right? You might want.
I really think that it will be like you're talking about. I think a lot of women will be in the politics, in social life, and so on and so far, not because Ukraine will decide it, because Ukrainian women will decide this. Because right now we are already doing all this stuff, all these things. We are working, we are helping, we are volunteering, we are growing our kids, we are pregnant, we are having babies, we are doing our weddings and divorces, and so we are doing all the things. We are driving car and call the grocery shop to have some products because we don't have something to eat for our kids, and so on and so far. So I think it will be. I really think.
Many soldiers, men and women, mostly men, who will come back to civilian life, and that will be very challenging for society, as it is in lots of places. You will have, I guess, a lot of women who left Ukraine to live in Poland or Germany or wherever will come back to Ukraine, and that will change the economy too. One of the pieces of research I did last year, about this time last year, around Izium was understanding just the extent of landmines and how many. I mean, not just Izium, right across the eastern country. And again, even if the war finishes tomorrow, how you begin to deal with those issues are huge. And another very severe and long-term problem is going to be just people's mental health.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, PTSD today in Ukraine is very popular. It's very popular, and all of us, we are traumatized because it's a real terrorism. I don't have any other word for this.
And the scale of how that gets treated, I don't know. I mean, some of these things, particularly around the landmines, in a strange way, the landmine issue and the mental health issue have some similarities for me, because you're just going to need an unbelievable amount of resources to be able to address this thing. But you have to, right? Because you can't live in a society, you can't live in a country where I think 20% of the country is covered in landmines. I mean, apart from the economy, you need somehow to fix that. And again, with so many people traumatized, just to get a fully functioning society, that's going to have to be dealt with somehow.
I heard such a phrase from the member of the United States also, citizen of New York. He said that Ukrainian soil and Ukrainian soul are traumatized equal.
Yeah, that makes sense. Really, that makes sense.
It looks like it is, because the shells, mines, and so on and so far in Kharkiv region, for example. I don't think that my son will see the Izium district or Stary Saltiv district near, or Pechenegi, near 10 or 15 years. Yeah. And it's a very optimistic prognosis.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I saw those sappers in Izium last year, or around Izium, Clear. They're trying, I mean, inch by inch, with by hand to clear the landmines. And there are machines I know that can do it, that can drive up and down, but
drones, yes, and so on.
That's not ideal. I mean, you can blow up the mine, but then the mine, all the pieces of the mine are then in the soil, and it's not good. One of the things that when people ask me about what's it like in Ukraine, and I have a lot of stories to tell, but I often tell this story about a woman near Izium who has been growing vegetables for a couple of years now in the land just next to her house, because she and her husband were just on their hands and knees, and they inch by inch dug up all of the mines by hand, right? Yeah. Super dangerous.
Yeah.
Sort of a bit crazy, frankly. And very Ukrainian.
Absolutely, yes.
Not waiting for the authorities to come and do it, right? And deciding that this is, I mean, it's representative, symbolic in a lot of ways. This is our land, right? I mean, literally, this is her field, right? And, it's covered in landmines. So she's going to take the huge risk to dig it up, dig them all up. It took her a month, I think. And plant vegetables, and now she's selling vegetables because of the volunteerska crowd in Kharkiv.
Story for you personally in Ukraine, the most emotional maybe.
I think every time I go with the guys who are doing the evacuations, and I'm only here every couple of months and doing it a little bit at a time. Some of these guys are going almost every day, right? Yeah. Less now because of the mobilization, and maybe we'll talk about that in a second. But when you go to a village, and it's mostly elderly people who are left there, and the idea is ideally you turn up because the village is under threat or even under fire. You turn up in a vehicle, and really you just want those people to get in straight away and leave straight away, because the longer you're there, the more dangerous, right? But you can see how emotionally difficult it is for people to leave their homes. People in their 80s sometimes, and they say, I grew up here, my parents grew up here, and they know that if they get into the van or into the car with you, okay, they're coming back to the safety of Kharkiv city, but there's a good chance they will never go home again, right?
Yeah.
That's difficult. And then when you bring them to Kharkiv city, some people have relatives either here or somewhere else in the country, but some people don't. And again, people outside of Ukraine say to me, why are those people still living in those villages, right? It's sort of crazy, right? They're going to get killed. And I understand that, but also, you know, if you leave that home that's always been your home and your family's home, you come to the shelter in Kharkiv, it's not like you're starting a fantastic new life. So when you see somebody leaving that home where they grew up, where their parents grew up, and it's not like we're taking them to a new dream life in Kharkiv, right? They're taken to the shelter that, you know, people are very caring and they look after them, but that's probably goodbye to all that they know, you know, to that life. And so, you know, when you evacuate somebody, you feel a mixture of success, that you've rescued them from somewhere very dangerous. I mean, they want to leave, but they sort of don't want to leave, but they have to. But you know that this isn't, you're not bringing them to a fantastic, happy ending, right? You know, this is just a new phase of the struggle for them. But that is very important work, and I think one of the frustrations I see that I share here is with the mobilization of men. You know, and I understand that a country at war needs soldiers, right? Yes. No question. And I get stopped on the street here often by the mobilization teams asking me for documents, you know, and then when they see that I'm Irish, of course, that's fine. But I see men who are doing, I mean, really life-saving work, right? Going to evacuate people because nobody else is doing it, right?
On the front line.
On the front line, going to Vovchansk, going to Pokrovsk, going to Kupiansk. That these men are either taken into the army or they fear that they will be taken into the army because, you know, anyone walking the street can be, but of course when you go from here to the front line, there are a series of army roadblocks, checkpoints. And so any man who is between 25 and 60 is liable to be taken. So, I mean, the reality of that means that there are fewer people who are going to do the evacuations. And it's also why I feel that I should do my little bit of help because I can. I can't be taken into the army. And so that's a frustration in that, you know, if you stop these guys from doing that work of going to the front line and saving the lives of those civilians, nobody else is going to do it. So I know it's easy to criticise and it's a difficult situation here, but that's very frustrating that you have men who are prepared, they're not too scared to go to the front line, but they don't want to go and be pushed into the army.
You know, we really do not understand why the system is working like this, but the opposite side is that the system is fresh and we had no practice in it. Unfortunately, some stories about the mobilization are awful. I don't support the methods of bussification, but on the other side, I do support the mobilization.
I think the answer really is that there ought to just be a better system for booking people, for getting exemptions for real volunteers. You know, some of these guys I know have been doing this, you know, many times a week for 6 months, nearly a year, some of them. And so I don't see how you can't work out a system where you can say, okay, it's clear that this guy is real, he's not a faker, he's a real volunteer really doing evacuations from Kharkiv called Rose on Hand, and you know, the Tigran.
Rose on Hand, yeah, they are so cool guys.
I go with those guys when I go, and Tigran Galustian was from that team was killed in October doing that work in Pokrovsk. I was there a few days before that. So, you know, they're doing some of the most dangerous work, and I think if they want to, they should be allowed to do it to continue and rescue civilians.
It was a very big loss.
Oh.
He was a hero.
Well, you know, again, you know what I said earlier about how some people respond to a crisis like this. Really, that's extraordinary to me, that people are prepared to risk their lives every time they go and do it. They say, you know, every time they leave the home in the morning, they don't know for certain they're going to come back. Tigran didn't come back.
Yeah.
And part of the reason that I want to report, I want to show what's happening, is that this is among the best of people. It's not that they're from Kharkiv. It's not that they're Ukrainian. I see fantastic things happening around the world. The ordinary people are doing extraordinary things. But here, I mean, it's just everywhere because the stress, the danger, the pressure is so great. People are responding. I see young journalists here. You know, there's the independent media here, Guara, and I mean, you know, I'm old now. Everybody looks young to me, but these people really are young. You know, they're in their 20s, and they responded 3 years ago and since by providing fantastic services to the people here about disinformation.
Yeah.
You know, telling people what's true, what's not true. Becoming suddenly, I mean, really suddenly, overnight, war correspondents. You know, no training, no experience in that, no training or experience much in journalism at all.
Absolutely, yes.
And yet, you know, they're producing really high quality work. And I also fear for them, frankly, that long-term exposure to war trauma is something that has to be dealt with at some time, or it's really going to come back, you know, in 10, 20, 30, 40 years' time to haunt them, both in Ukraine and outside Ukraine, what I think is going to happen. And of course, the truth is, I don't know. I have no secret information, right?
Yeah.
I wish I did, but I have no secret information. But I think certainly there's a sense now that people are starting to talk about what happens when the conflict ends. I mean, some of our conversation today is about that. I don't know that we would have been talking like that last year.
Yeah.
It does seem as though things are not entering like the final days, but towards an end. And how long that lasts, of course, I don't know. But I would not be surprised if this year the fighting has stopped. Now, that could take many forms. It could be like a temporary ceasefire that doesn't last very long. It could be a permanent, sustainable peace.
Yeah.
And somewhere between those two things, my own prediction is I think that's likely to happen this year. Although when I say it to people, I notice when I say it to people in Kharkiv, when I ask them, what do you think is going to happen, generally people are not optimistic that things will finish this year. Mm-hmm. And you know, they think there's going to be a fourth winter of war. I mean, we're just finishing the third one, right? And they may be right. Of course, they may be right. But I think that those conversations have started now, both in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine, with the big players who matter outside Ukraine. And so I think once those conversations take hold, not much will change internally. I mean, the front line changes a little bit, but not very much. So I hope that there will be, of course, a just, sustainable peace. But I think at least I expect the fighting to stop before the end of this year.
You know, even if we'll write down this ceasefire, yes, in this year, mm-hmm. I don't think it will be stopped in one day. It will be a process.
Yeah.
Even about the missiles, the bombs and fire and so on. Yeah. So I do really want to ask our people not to stop donations. We need to help our army. We need to help our people. We need to help our volunteers who are evacuating people, because right now we have such a problem. You know, people think that the negotiations, so the war is over. I yep. cannot do anything. Yep. I can buy a new shoes, a new purchase or right. something. Yes, but I'm always talking that we need to help our warriors, them to be safe, for us to be safe, for our lives to.
And if there is a day, you know, whenever it is, and there is just a day, like the end of the First World War, you know, 11 o'clock yeah. on the 11th of November, it just stops. And let's say that happens, and let's say it's more or less respected, right? And it really is the end of the firing. That's not the end of the need for people to contribute. However, in fact, like we said, there are going to be new problems, big problems that the country faces. So I see a new wave of volunteerism needed once the fighting stops. With different challenges, people will be coming home. Their houses will be broken. I mean, some fairly practical things will need help, and that money has to also come from somewhere.
I really do appreciate you for this.
Thank you very much. I was watching your podcast many times on Instagram and YouTube, and thank God there's like a translation caption. And I never dreamed I'd be a guest, so I'm very honoured. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's just very important for us. Your work, the work of your organization, the work with refugees, and the things that you saw for your own in Ukraine, it's really very, very important for us because we feel your support. Every time when you came in Kharkiv, we feel your support. We feel that you are standing with us, standing with Ukraine. It's just speechless for us.
Thank you.